The Sealed Fate of a Drunken Salesman by CzarCarcosa. The bridge leading into town was much too narrow for my liking, but it gave me an idea. The idea had been bouncing in my head since I'd seen it in the distance. It was a morbid one, but it didn't sound too bad at the moment. I could turn my wheel sharply and crash my car into the river below. It wouldn't be so bad, as my head pounded from the whiskey from the night before, and my stomach was churning, leaving me to wonder if I might throw up at any moment. It would have been a hell of a way to go. The best salesman of EKINC named Leonard Milch, found dead in his car. My obituary could even say I was covered in stains from my vomit as I drowned. I wouldn't do it, though, because I'm not inconsiderate. It would be terrible to wreck the new company car that I was driving. I may be drunk, but at least I was not a prick. It wasn't something I could do no matter how much I hated my job and the company I worked for. The phone began to ring, and I knew it was him. "Hello, boss."
"What are you doing, killer?"
"I'm driving into Toonie right now. What's up?"
"I just wanted to let you know that you've won Best Salesman. You've officially beat old Lou's record."
"I'm not surprised, boss," I replied, while I reached for my flask. "Lou has lost his mojo." He laughed.
"Lou would want to kill you if he heard that."
"He's just an old fart who always disliked me, so fuck him." I could see a sign telling me I was entering the town of Toonie. Its population was 6,000 according to 2010. The houses were nice brick homes with big porches and lush yards. The shades of green surprised as I drove past each lawn. It was the kind of town I used to long for, a place where I could plant roots and live out my life.
"Stop by the office when you're done with your latest client. I want to give you the plaque myself."
"That sounds great, boss. I will head that way in a couple of days, but I'm actually close to a client's house now, so can we talk later?"
"Sounds good, killer. I will let you know that this client is a special one, so let me know how it goes, okay?"
It sounded cryptic. "Sounds good, boss. I'll talk to you later," I replied as I hung up the phone. I did not like the sound of that, not even a little bit. It worried me and left me to assume that this client was especially awful. I assumed the worst in humanity in the past few months. They all wanted the same thing when they signed up for EKINC, and it was simple. They wanted to kill someone. We as a species are all a selfish and bloodthirsty bunch. I had realized that all of us were beyond redemption. It wasn't worth trying to talk hateful beings out of bargaining their souls. I could argue and beg until I was blue in the face, but they could never change their minds. They all wanted to hurt someone. It was for that reason that I embraced my path in life. I was a salesman of death. I drove further into town. It was a warm summer afternoon. I looked over to see a small park. The sound of children echoed from it. They each had a light in their eyes and big smiles. The children were the only thing I had not yet felt a sense of loathing. But those children would grow into adults. They would become as vile as the parents who created them. I turned on my blinker and turned right, driving further down the road. The houses started to become smaller, the lawns less kept, and the roads bumpy. It was clear that I had left the nice part of town. I felt my tire sink into a pothole and the car rattled. "Son of a fucking bitch!" I shouted, as I gripped the wheel tightly. It seemed that no one cared about road maintenance in this little strip of town. I regained my composure and drove more slowly, also hoping the car was fine. I kept an eye out for more surprises as I began to notice I was getting closer to the address. I looked on to see the house in the distance. It was the one in the worst condition. With the sight of a mobile home colored red, with vinyl sliding off, I turned into the driveway made of gravel and looked at the sorry state of the land. Its grass long overdue for a cut, and an old blue Camaro sat rusting in the center of the yard. The boss had told me the client would be unique. He was right. They weren't the usual client leads. Well, this is going to be fun. I parked my car and stared at the home. as I reached for my flask and took a long drink. The storm door was coming off its hinges, often swaying with the breeze. It made an awful noise as it moved. I double-checked the address, hoping I was in the wrong place, but I wasn't. I was at the home of Irma Callius. The name sounded like a plump and surly waitress you'd find in a cheap diner. I had some ideas of why she would sign up. If I was a betting man, it would be anger directed at a new girl Irma works with, the new young woman that is slowly taking her good shifts away. I lit a cigarette and turned to the passenger seat. My briefcase laid there closed. I took a deep drag and opened it. The book and knife sat in the case next to some new vitamins that we weren't selling. I grabbed the book and wrapped up the knife with a small linen, stuffing it into my right pocket. It would be pointless to try to sell anything, and I figured I might as well save the words and effort. It was always the crimson seal that they wanted. "All right, here we go," I said, while I looked into the mirror. I had started to look rough. I had forgotten to shave these past few days. I would need to do that before I checked back into the office. It was time to be the salesman as I exited my car. The sound from the door creaked, and I heard rodents inside the rusted car. I took another drink from my flask as I walked up to the small wooden stairs. They shook as I stepped on them. It left me to think that they could break underneath me. I took one last drink and knocked on the door. I could hear the sound of shuffling feet, and the door opened. A young girl with braided red hair answered. She looked no older than 8. She had light green eyes, and they looked hard as steel. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice seemed cold. "Hello, young lady. Is your mother home?" She shook her head. "No, she's at work at the restaurant if you need her." "Do you know what time she'll be home?" I asked with a smile. I had called it with her mother working at the restaurant. I studied the girl. She wore a pair of jeans and a dark blue shirt with a drawn cat on it, and I noticed a small bruise on her right arm. "She won't be back until late tonight, but my stepdad is here," she answered. "That's all right. I can come back tomorrow, but just tell Irma I stopped by, please." "Her name's not Irma. My mom's name is Tina." "Huh, I guess I have the wrong house." "My name is Irma, though. So who are you?" My name is Mr. Milch." "I was wondering when you might come by," Irma said with a small little grin. My knees began to feel weak and my heart sank. I did not want to believe a child could sign up for our products or that we would even allow it. I'm sorry, young lady, but we don't offer any products or toys for people your age." She frowned. "I don't want toys, Mr. Milch. I called you because I need to kill someone." "I'm afraid that you're too young for our services," I replied. "They didn't say anything when I signed up. Now do you want to come in?" She directed me inside, and for a moment I hesitated to follow, but ended up stepping inside. I thought to myself that I should speak to her stepdad, but I heard a loud snore as I watched Irma walk by a couch with a man sleeping. He was an overweight, bald man surrounded by beer cans and whiskey bottles. I walked closely behind her as we entered a bright pink room. It looked like a typical girl's bedroom. It had hand-drawn posters of cats and horses, which I assumed were Irma's design. She seemed like a talented little artist. "How do you do it?" Irma asked, as she closed the door behind us. "I'm sorry, but does your stepdad know you invited strangers inside?" "He won't notice. Steve has been drinking since he woke up, so he'll be passed out for a while." "I see. Now how do we kill someone?" she asked impatiently. I looked directly at her and said, "I don't think you quite understand the consequences of doing something like this. I know being a kid is hard, but killing a bully isn't the answer." "I'm not going to kill a bully, Mr. Milch." "Well, if you aren't going to kill a bully, then who do you want dead?" "My stepdad, Steve." She replied with a tone that scared me and made me feel uncomfortable. It made me think even children were rotten to the core. I walked over to a small twin bed and laid the book on it, and just looked over to her. Just when I thought my existence couldn't become even worse. Now I have children wanting to kill people. Yes, so are we going to do it or not? That's it for me. I'm out, I said dryly. I know stepkids sometimes have a hard time with their new dads, but you can't just kill them. I grabbed the book from beside me and stood up. She had a small tear in the corner of her eye. I had no time for hurt feelings, nor a little girl's spitefulness. I had wasted enough time and started heading towards the door. Where are you going, Mr. Milch? I'm leaving, and a word of advice. Talk to a guidance counselor or something. I opened the door when I heard something that stopped me in my tracks. It was the sound of a sob, as I turned around to Irma and her bright red face, flushed with tears coming. He hurts me, Mr. Milch, she sobbed. He hurts you? I asked. Yes, he hurts my mom, too, but when she isn't around, he hurts me. I'm sorry, kid, but I'm gonna call a social worker. I tried that once, and he got away with it. And he told me if I tried again, he would kill us both. Then call the police the next time it happens. This isn't a game, Irma. If you do this, you may never get the chance to grow up. It will never end until he's dead, she cried and wiped her nose. If it keeps going, I may be dead anyway, so what do I have to lose? I stared at her for a moment. It did explain the bruise on her arm, but the past few months had taught me to think the worst of others. How do I know you're telling me the truth? I asked. I'll show you. Irma answered while she rolled up part of her shirt to reveal part of her stomach. It slowly revealed deep bruise marks in her pale, fair skin. It wasn't the only thing. She had small burn marks. It looked like cigarette burns. He did that? I asked, as I sat back on the bed holding the book in my hand. Yes, he does it where other people can't see. It wasn't too long ago that I considered driving off a bridge, but the world became heavier as I looked at the damage to Irma's body. If anyone had a right to use the Crimson Seal, it would be her. She had convinced me as I opened the book and found a blank page. I pulled the knife from my pocket and unraveled it, setting it next to me. My hands began to shake, and I lit a cigarette. I needed to calm my nerves somehow. What is his full name? Steve Barber, she said, as she looked over to me. I held out my palm as she looked on as I grabbed the knife. I took another deep inhale from my cigarette and clenched my teeth to keep it in place. I looked at the little girl named Irma and her green eyes. She still had a chance. I took the knife and began to cut deeply down my fingertips. It was more painful than I'd ever realized. I winced in pain as she looked up to me. Is this how you do it, Mr. Milch? No, not really, but I couldn't think of anything else. Also, stop calling me Mr. Milch. You can just call me Leo. I placed my hand on the blank page of the book. It felt as if it were sucking the blood from my hand. It was another thing I didn't know would happen. I did the final part, and I said his name. Steve Barber. What happens now? She asked curiously. Do you have a back door? I asked, as I wrapped my hand in the linen that concealed the knife. And can you make it to your mother's work safely? She nodded. Good. I want you to run there. I want you to go there and not look back, okay? No matter what you see or what you hear. I can do that, Mr. Milch. I mean, Leo. I struggled to smile. Good. Now run along now. He won't hurt you anymore." She smiled at me, and it warmed my heart for a moment before she turned and left the room. I lit another cigarette and retrieved my things. I exited the room and headed to the couch, where I saw it standing over the man named Steve Barber. "I'm surprised you waited this long," I said, as I looked at the tall, gray-skinned figure. It had a face that looked much like mine, but its eyes were hollow and yellow. It was a part of my soul. It held all of my dark thoughts, such as my contempt. I shook him awake, and he looked startled. He stared at me and the dark part of my soul with fear and confusion. I leaned in close and said, "I wanted you to see my face before you die, and let you know personally, you will never hurt anyone again." I looked down to Steve's lifeless body, then glanced back up the part of me that had done the task. "I suppose you'll come for me one day, so I guess I'll see you around," I said, taking a drink from my flask. It sneered at me, and I grinned. But not today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Thus concludes the Crimson Seal saga. Who knows, we may hear more from Leonard Milch, if CzarCarcosa ever cooks up more stories for him. I personally would be very happy to hear it. I've enjoyed this saga quite a bit, and this last one hits hard. For all the right reasons, too. On to more Dapper news. Our newest episode is up on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, with the YouTube coming up soon, and we'll be updating that as quickly as possible. That being said, we do really hope you enjoy the new episodes. Like, favorite, share, and subscribe them for us, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, you can visit our Patreon page, as well as the Right Hand of Doom's Patreon page, where you'll find some more stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much once again for joining me on this wonderful adventure. I hope to see you guys in the next narration. I don't know what it is, but if you have some ideas for me, leave a comment down below. In the meantime, as always, ladies and gentlemen, sweet dreams and pleasant nightmares.